What can I say? My great-grandfather is one of my biggest heroes and has had a huge influence into my fascination with the Second World War. I was too young to ask him questions about his service, but I've managed to piece together some of his movements throughout the war and thought I'd share them with you before we go into the diorama that I made in his honour. So, let's take a look at what my great-grandfather got up to in the Second World War. He enlisted into the Royal Air Force in 1941. He spent some time in England training, mainly at the RAF training base Wilmslow, and he trained as a fighter plotter. He also underwent training to become a gunner on bombers, but he failed due to his eyesight. Once his training was complete, he was sent to Iceland for a year. He spent the bulk of his time at RAF Reykjavik. The main objectives of the RAF in Iceland at this time was anti-submarine patrols, aerial reconnaissance, and air-sea rescue. Once his deployment in Iceland was over, he was sent back to England and then transferred up to Scotland to be stationed at RAF Milltown. After just shy of 3 months, he boarded a ship bound for India and transferred to SEAC, Southeast Asia Command. Talk about a shock to the system. Imagine being transferred from one incredibly cold country to then being moved to one that is stifling hot. That would have required some adjusting. He was stationed with mobile signals units throughout India, reporting enemy aircraft movements, as well as spending time defending his airbase from Japanese incursions. We don't have much more information on his movements throughout India in 1944 to 45, as his service record is in parts pretty difficult to read. What we do know is that he has plenty of pictures, and they include photos of him with his regiment, as well as ones with the famous Lord Mountbatten. At war's end, he found himself in Singapore and was there up until mid-1946. He was then sent back to the UK. His experiences as a fighter plotter and being part of various signals units led to his eventual hiring as an executive at I've created this diorama to honour his service, particularly his time in Southeast Asia. It's been years since he passed, but his sacrifices and memory will never be forgotten. Now, if you're interested in this kit, just type in CMK 172 RAF Mechanic and Elephant. You will find it pretty much in any country. It seems to be readily available. And when you get it, it'll come in just a little tiny pack with a bit of paper and then your goodies inside. It's all resin, and you might have seen this from part 1 where I painted the elephant, but we'll look at that in a little bit more detail later on. But let's actually have a look at what you get. So you get a nice resin elephant. You can see there's a bit of cleanup involved, primarily on the top. This guy was very fun to take off because the feet were really difficult, but I just had to use a sharp Stanley knife to get that off. Same as this one as well, but the detail on the rest of the model is really nice. So you can see here that I'm using my Stanley knife to get in there. Really unprofessional, and you can imagine that I'm probably going to cut myself in the process of doing this. So I really would recommend trying to find another way of getting him off this base. If you do know one, please do let me know, because yeah, I had absolutely no idea how to get him off that little base. And then just to tidy up all the sort of little mold lines and that, I'm using just a very sharp knife, as well as a metal file, and also just your sort of nail file that you'd get in some sort of makeup kit. You can see I've got a metal file and I've sped it up now, so I'm going absolutely nuts with it. I didn't realise until I started dry brushing the elephant that the metal file was a bit too thick, so you can actually see the teeth of the file in the resin elephant. So if you're going to use a metal file, use the metal file and then go to a really fine file just to clean up those file marks. Now, I mentioned before I've painted the elephant already. That is part 1, link in description to that. That is purely focusing on the elephant. So we're not going to cover that today. We've already painted the elephant. But what we are going to cover is the crew and my granddad in a way. So to paint the British uniform, I'm using olive drab. And I'm also making sure that I've given it a prime of Tamiya Surface Primer Light Grey. Light grey is really good because it's going to make these brighter colours and greens and that pop a lot better than just a dark one. Now I've also painted the elephant rider's shorts in that colour, and I'm then going to paint his shirt in khaki. You can obviously mix it up a bit here. I'm just assuming that these would have had supplies from the British, so giving him British shorts probably was a good shout, I believe. As well as painting the webbing for the British soldier and his gaiters in the same colour. Then for his shoes, I'm going to be painting them in black grey, as well as the native rider's sort of like cane or whip for the elephant, as brutal and barbaric as that sounds. I'm going to be painting that in black grey too. Then obviously you pick what colour you want for the hair. My granddad had darker hair, so I'm going to be using German camo medium brown for this one. Yeah, you can go as dark or as light as you really want to. I just think this is just such a great model. You can see the pose is just really nice too. Then for the belt that the native rider's got, I'm using Deck Tan, as well as his turban as well. It's going to be painted in that colour. So there's really not too much you actually have to paint for either of these, because they don't really have too much on. This guy's got his turban and his sort of like fabric belt, as well as shirt and shorts. Same as the British model as well, and then the rest of it is pretty much just flesh. And once you got those colours down, we want to give it a wash. So I give it a wash of normal oil and technical medium. If you're new here, you wouldn't know that, but if you're a long time member, you will know that this is pretty much my wash for everything these days. It's just a 1-to-1 ratio purely because I like it to be a bit diluted. It's not so strong as a black wash, and it acts more of a in-between wash and glaze. Now it's all about going over our base colour with the same colour again after it's been washed, to create some nice layers and give that uniform some definition, which you can see I'm doing here. I'm just starting to build up the colour. So now we go with US Olive Drab and German Camo Beige at a 2-to-1 ratio, and this is where we're really going to start making stuff pop. So I'm going to start adding details to pockets. I'm going to start adding details to seam lines, to creases and stuff like that. You're going to leave the really dark colours in the crease recesses, and then you're going to start picking out the detail. So I've zoomed in here. The quality of the footage isn't as great, but you can see what I'm trying to get at, because this is the final highlight now. It's at a 1-to-1 ratio, and I'm just adding in little details here, and this is going to make those shorts look baggier with his hands in the pockets, etc. Now we do the exact same thing but with khaki. So I'm painting this chap's shirt, and you can see that I'm just building it up. This is again the first layer, so you can be a bit more messy here, but try not to put too much on your paintbrush, and just follow the scratching method that I like to do. Now if you're unfamiliar with the scratching method, what I mean by that is putting a little bit on the tip of your paintbrush and slowly work it in, opposed to a blob. Then for the highlight, I use khaki and stone grey at a 2-to-1 ratio. So now this is where we start adding all those details in again, and just putting little tiny bits of highlights in the areas that really need it. So those raised areas and bits that you really want to stand out, as we saw in the previous uniform shot. And then we go over the belt in the same manner. Then for the Deck Tan, we're putting it back over, so we're layering it back on again. So we're leaving the really dark Deck Tan after it's been washed in the dark areas of where the belt would be and the turban. You can see this just starting to come to life again. It's not white yet, that's more of a cream colour, but to get it white we use white grey. I don't normally go with just a straight white. I don't know why, because white grey and just a flat white really look almost identical, so you don't have to follow this white or recommended white, because they are pretty much exactly the same, but I don't know, I just seem to use white grey for whatever reason. Now for the flesh, I'm only going to show you the native rider, so I'm using base flesh. We're going with like an Indian skin tone for this, which is, I've not really experimented too much with different skin tones other than Caucasian, just because I find it the easiest to paint. So if you don't agree with this, then yeah, just let me know below. So I use base flesh from AK, and then I go normal oil again over the flesh that we've just painted, making sure that I get in all the cracks as well, giving it a nice wash. If you want to know how I paint Caucasian flesh, I've got a dedicated video for that already. Then we go over it with a layer of base flesh. You can see that I'm catching the top of the brows there. I'm going to get the nose, I'm going to get the majority of the face. I'm just going to leave the really dark areas that we've just washed, where sort of like the nose meets the lips, and where the eye sockets are, and the inner ear canal, for example, and stuff like that. And then to give it a nice highlight, this is where I'm going to start hitting the tip of the nose. I'm going to add just a little bit underneath the eyes, a little line on top where the brows would be, a little line on the chin, as well as like the fingers, the elbow, toes, knee, things like that. And if you scratch it on and just slowly work it in, you'll really start to see how it all just pops and comes together and becomes really easy to use. And then finally, for the riders, cane or whip, where I use black grey. I'm just going over it. I'm literally just dry brushing on a very lazy dry brush. I'm using my good brush, which is a really naughty thing to do. But yeah. Now I've got some more of the flesh painting videos that I might put together and give you a better understanding of how I painted knees and elbows and such, just because it is a really fine art to get right, even at 1/72 scale, and I don't believe I've even got it right yet, but I think it looks okay. So yeah, I really hope that this video has been enjoyable. It's certainly something a lot different. I really hope that it's given you something to think about. Perhaps you've got a loved one that was in a conflict that you'd like to dedicate something to. Yeah, my great granddad was somebody that I absolutely loved and adored, so I hope this has done him proud. Huge thank you goes out to my patrons for supporting me and the channel, for helping me make videos like this. I'm going to leave it here, guys, and I will catch you at the next one. Thanks.